Let's go.
Let's go.
Oh, did you want to?
Sorry, I'll let you.
Next time.
I'm in love with you.
Snap out of it.
I'll have what she's having.
Too many guys think I'm a concept, or I complete them, or I'm gonna make them alive. I'm just a fucked up girl who's looking for my own peace of mind. Don't assign me yours.
Caustic wit is my religion.
I would make a great queen because I am so stubborn.
I say when it comes to stardom and Lauren, there are no accidents.
Hi, Karen Peterson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Citizen Dame, the podcast where girls rule and boys drool. I am Karen Peterson, joined as always by Lauren Humphreys Brooks.
We're very serious adult film critics.
We're grown-ups.
We're grown-up. We're very serious adult film critics. That's what we are. Hello.
Hi. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Waiting for a hurricane. Seeing if that's gonna happen.
Yeah. How the current predictions, how close is it going to come to you? Is it going to be like right over your house?
No, it's not going to be right over my house. That's not what they're predicting. One never knows. I mean, you know, this one in particular has been very unpredictable. But no, it's supposed right now they're thinking that it's probably going to touch down somewhere in Massachusetts or just at the edge of Long Island, which is not where I live. I do not live on Long Island.
Well, cool. Massachusetts is where my sister lives, so you know.
Yes, there are
awesome.
a lot of warnings on for Connecticut, Massachusetts. A lot of the outlying islands in New York's like Fire Island, Montauk, etc. So if you're right on the coast, it's not great. We're definitely going to get weather. Like that's the big question. But right now it is not predicted to pass directly over where I live. The biggest thing is winds and flash floods, but wind is far more concerning. I live on the 14th floor, so wind is far more concerning than flooding.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we'll see.
Oh.
I'm good, just kind of sitting here being like, all right, well, it's nice weather right now, actually.
Well, hey, that's good. Is it the calm before the storm? Is that what you're...
I think so. That's very, very humid out, so it definitely feels like we're preparing for some rain.
Yikes. Well, while you're dealing with that, I'm dealing with possible COVID, and that's fun. Not me personally, I don't think yet. I haven't been tested, but I've also been told I don't need to be. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, at work, you know, it's just, this is the joy of working with a public institution and in a pandemic. But that's, you know, we've got a recall going on here in California, and I think that some shutdowns will start to happen after the recall's done if the governor keeps his seat. If he gets thrown out, then everything's out the window and California is going to die. Like all of California is just gonna burn. That's just how it is. Please don't vote for Larry Elder. Yeah, vote no on the recall, people. If you're in California listening to this, that's my plea to you. Please vote and vote no. Yeah.
Well, early voting has started, hasn't it?
It has, yeah.
Yeah, so some people have actually already cast their votes.
Yeah, I have my ballot. I haven't dropped it off yet. I'm gonna probably do that today. So, but yeah, it's just everyone who's running to like try to steal the seat is running on a campaign of like, I won't have mask mandates. Like the main guy that is probably the likeliest winner is Larry Elder, who's a radio personality. He's had radio talk shows for years, and he literally, his campaign commercials have been like, well, we need to recall the governor because of corruption. And if I am elected, I'm just going to not have mask mandates and I'm not going to close stuff. And I'm like, okay, so that's the whole thing you're running on. We have to get rid of the governor, the duly elected governor. We have to get rid of him just because you say there's corruption. You're like, It's so frustrating. It's like, he's out of office next year anyway. Spend your time and energy focusing on the replacement person, not this farce, you know?
Yeah, so if he was to get recalled and someone else were to be installed, would then the next year there would be another election anyways.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's just to
so
finish his term.
That's so weird.
Yeah.
That's so weird. I mean, I kind of understand. So, like, in New York, obviously, we just got a new governor. I don't know when she actually officially becomes governor, but Cuomo resigned.
I think it was 2 weeks from whenever he resigned. So
yeah, so soon, very soon,
yeah.
actually. So yeah, so, which I get, but that's like the lieutenant governor because the governor resigned.
Right.
That's not like we're going to completely replace
exactly
the entire governor.
Yeah, and that's where it's like after the whole Schwarzenegger thing happened in the early 2000s, they should have. There does need to be a process in place for getting rid of politicians, elected officials that are corrupt, that are committing crimes, things like that. There needs to be a process in place for that. And I'm not a fan of Gavin Newsom. I never voted for him. I don't like him. I want him gone for many reasons, but I also think he hasn't done anything that rises to the level of like just unseating him right now, at least in my understanding of our state politics. And what frustrates me is the process really is 100% just so it's the only way that Republicans can get power at that level, because the way, and I don't agree with the way that our primaries are done. It's just the top two candidates. So you can have two people from the same party duking it out at the general election. And I mean, I'm personally not in favor of parties at all, but I think that's just not the way to fix it. And so yeah, what they need to do is reform the system so that if there's a recall of the governor, it's not just a whole bunch of random people throwing their hat in the ring and becoming the governor. It needs to just fall to the lieutenant governor. They don't run together. It's not a ticket. So it's not like the president and the vice president. They run separate elections. They're each separately elected.
This is very weird, I have to say, as an outsider. I know that every state has its own politics, but California seems to have some of the weirder politics.
Oh yeah,
ways that for such a massive state too, for a state that has like such a large population and like percentage of the U.S. economy. I mean, you guys are basically another country.
Yeah, we have like the 5th largest economy in the world.
Yeah, it's wild.
And then it's like there's all these stupid things like the Constitution can be amended, or just other laws can be passed either by the legislature or by getting enough petition signatures to put it on the ballot for a vote of the people. So it's like, why do we even have the legislature? And it's just like, yeah, California is a mess. We need to clean it up really bad.
Sounds wild.
Yeah. Anyway, you're listening to the California Politics podcast.
We always do this. Like, I'm sorry to our listeners who don't enjoy this. If like a large percentage of you do not enjoy us talking about this random shit at the beginning of our episodes, please let us know, because we're going to keep on doing it.
Yeah, unless people like overwhelmingly tell us to knock it off, we're just going to keep doing it because we like it. Or your other option is you can just fast forward a couple of minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, well, we did have some news this week. So let's start with the Denis Villeneuve stuff. It's interesting because the article that you had sent me earlier, a couple days ago, has been deleted, or the tweet, because apparently that was actually from last year. It wasn't current. So I'm not sure where we stand on that. But there's been a whole lot of talk about this article that resurfaced that was from, I think, a French newspaper originally, saying that Denis Villeneuve refuses to send out screeners or links or anything for Dune, that he insists that critics watching the movie, industry people watching the film, they have to see it in a theater, which good luck with the Academy if that's your stance, because it's required to be on the Academy's streaming platform to be considered for Oscar nominations. So there you go.
Well, I mean, I think that the other article actually is contemporary about the boat in a bathtub, the speedboat in a bathtub discussion.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That is more contemporary, but that particularly was about the fact that Dune is being released in theaters and on HBO Max, right? So which, and I guess it's kind of fair that Villeneuve is pissed off about that. I think that there are probably reasons for filmmakers to be angry about having these day and date releases. At the same time, there's this constant prizing of the theatrical experience, right? And people keep on using that phrase too. And it's reached a point where I'm like, I don't know what you think the theatrical experience is anymore. Like, what does this actually look like? Is it just seeing a film on a big screen? Like, because I most films that I see are not on big screens anymore. That's true for most people, I think.
Yeah.
As we've talked about previously, I've never seen Jaws on a big screen. Does that mean that I've never seen Jaws? Do I have to always watch it? Does every first viewing of every film have to be on a big screen? Because in that case, like, there are a lot of films I'm never going to see. I don't know. I just find it I find it very odd and very limiting that there are filmmakers, people like Villeneuve, who are almost saying, "Don't see my movie." I'm like, okay, you know what? If the requirement is I have to see it on a big screen, fine. I'm not going to see it because I don't feel comfortable in theaters right now. And even then, I don't know if I'd see it because I don't necessarily want to sit through a 155-minute film in a movie theater while someone chews popcorn next to me.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, what these guys don't understand, they have access to screening rooms. Some of them have screening rooms in their houses, and so their version of a theatrical experience is very insulated. Let me tell you, last night I went to see Reminiscence at the AMC, and there weren't very many people there, so we were pretty distanced, partly because just nobody knows what the fuck that movie is. I've watched it and I'm still not totally sure. But my experience was, I'm sitting in this theater, I'm in the back row. There's some people nearby me. One girl, her smartwatch kept lighting up through the whole movie, and it was very distracting. She kept responding to messages on it. Someone else kept checking their time, on their phone. People are talking. It's like, this is what the theatrical experience is that you're all so dedicated to. This is the reality in pretty much any theater you go to, unless you happen to pick a time where no one else is there. This is the experience of watching a movie in a theater. This is what you're so dedicated to. I can be much more focused and much less distracted sitting at home watching it in my living room without other strangers just talking around me and interrupting.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, I don't want to say that, like, oh, I hate going to the theater. I like going to movie theaters. I want to feel comfortable going to them again. That's something that I've always enjoyed doing. And I've had some great experiences in movie theaters watching films for the first time. Like, I'm sorry, one of the last films I saw before the pandemic, it was Cats. Right. And that was a fantastic experience because it was so funny. Like, and everyone in the theater was so engaged with how batshit insane this movie was. That was a great experience. I had a great time. That's something that I'm glad I got to do. I went to see The Lady Vanishes at Film Forum in a 35mm print. That was a wonderful experience for me. But there are those experiences, and then there are the ones that you're describing, that people answering their phone, people talking, people like, I can't imagine, I remember going to see The Witch, and there were a whole bunch of people who began talking halfway through that movie because they obviously did not really know what they were going to see.
Right. A Quiet Place too. I was like, wow, all these people that I'm in the theater with would be dead in the first 5 minutes because they can't shut up for 5 minutes.
So, the theatrical experience for a lot of people is very expensive. It's not necessarily, you're not guaranteed a good time, right? You might have a really good experience, or it might be a terrible one. And like I am very much like you in that I often try to go to movie theaters at like non-peak times so that I don't have to deal with that. So I'm like, okay, I'm sitting here in a recliner watching a movie. I could literally do this at home for much cheaper.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's, I'm getting tired of this whole idea that the theatrical experience is by necessity superior to watching a movie at home. And then also this sort of hubris of certain filmmakers, people like Villeneuve or Christopher Nolan, who are like, you must see my film in a theater. And it's like, or otherwise you're not really experiencing it. It's like, so your film is so fucking special that you're not grateful that people are watching it. What you want is that they have to watch it correctly. And if they don't watch it correctly, they're not really experiencing it.
Yeah. And then the other piece of this, because I completely agree with all that. And of course, I am with you. I enjoy going to the movies, even last night, even with the annoying stuff that was going on, it was like, I still enjoy seeing a movie on a big screen in a Dolby theater with this great kick-ass sound system and all that. I like that. But for me, where I see a lot of movies and, I go all the time and my experiences are varied based on a lot of factors, I can roll with it. For other people who they get to go to maybe one movie every couple of months because they've got kids or they just can't afford it or whatever. And it's like, this is their experience going to the movie. That would just make me insane. I would be so upset. And I'd be like, why am I bothering to do this anymore? I'm just going to watch something on Netflix at home.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we've talked about this in various forms for a while, but this was going on long before the pandemic started. The pandemic has just sort of sped things up a lot.
Yeah.
This issue of the theatrical experience, this issue, the reason why we now have recliners in movie theaters, we have all of these, new things, is because people weren't going, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And they were trying to get people to be willing to pay to go to the movies, to be willing to sit in the movie theater, all of those things. And so now the pandemic has just kind of exacerbated all of those issues. The other thing that we've talked about before, that Kristen has talked about, both on this podcast and in articles and things like that, is the issue of access and the issue of ableism. And there is a lot of ability access that is challenged by theaters. Mm-hmm. And, and I know that my own parents, like my mother is in a wheelchair. My father is over 65. Going to a movie theater is something of a chore for them. And so not having access to so much more at home is something that, they watch movies all the time. They love films, but they don't have that access to movie theaters in the same way. And even when they do, they're going to a multiplex because of the area of New York that they live in. It's not like me, where I have 15 different theaters within walking distance. And that is also something that's not really discussed. The availability of film via streaming actually makes a difference for disabled critics, for disabled people. People get to experience more films in more different ways, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. So yeah, you just referenced Kristen, and she wrote this article a week or two ago for IndieWire, which is where she works, and it was about the critics' access to screeners and screening links right now while we're in a pandemic, and how denying that is part of the problem, and how it also makes it difficult for disabled critics to do their jobs. And yeah, there's some interesting quotes in here from some critics around LA, one of which is Justin Chang, who works for the LA Times. And this one actually cracked me up, just in light of the Denis Villeneuve stuff. He's like, if filmmakers knew what studios were doing on their behalf and how they were treating their films, they'd be really upset. All this mess is because we're in a public health crisis. There needs to be some sacrifice made for people's safety and health and people's ability to do their work. And it's like, oh, it's so sweet and innocent that he thinks that all the filmmakers are upset or would be upset that the studios are blocking access. And it's like, no, I respect Justin Chang. He's a great writer. He's a very great film critic. But in this case, I think that's a little bit backwards.
Well, but that's the thing. You would hope, wouldn't you? You'd be like, well, of course, filmmakers want people to see their movies. Why wouldn't they? Like,
And I think in a lot of cases, like especially the smaller studios and the independent filmmakers, absolutely, they just want eyeballs on it. But yeah, people like Christopher Nolan and Villeneuve and some other folks, they want people to they want the theatrical experience back, whatever they define that as, and to the point where if a critic doesn't see it in a theater, then they're basically dismissing that critical analysis as invalid because they didn't see it the right way.
Well, and again, you're also talking about, that issue of access. So disability access, also just access in terms of location. Yeah. Right. So being in New York or LA is one thing. If you're, I've seen a number of critics talking about the only access that they get in the UK is via London. Right. So if you exist outside of London and you're a critic, you basically don't get access to those screenings, period. Yeah. Right. So streaming and screening links and things like that actually give more people more access. And so there is this other gatekeeping element to all of this. And I think that there are also a lot of major critics from bigger publications that are invested in keeping those gates. And that's another issue. So I think that one of the reasons, you see a lot of people then come out just like, well, but the theatrical experience is like, it's interesting. Who do you write for? And very often they're bigger publications, not smaller websites, not independent websites. These are people, first of all, that live in major cities, but then also have the wherewithal to go to those screenings. Yeah. You see critics also complain about the fact that there are screenings that are in the middle of the workday. And it's like, okay, if I have another job that I do to support my habit of being a critic, that I can't go to that screening because I have a job.
Yeah. Well, I had to miss Shang-Chi this week. They had screenings here in Hollywood. And this is the first one, like all the Disney stuff that has been out this year, they've given us the option. Like once they started doing in-person screenings again, they gave us the option of watching it in the theater or getting a link. And I've just been doing in theater because they've been keeping it really reduced the number of people that are there and stuff. So it's felt really safe. And it's been fun to go sit in, the El Capitan and watch a movie. But for Shang-Chi, this is the first one. They did not provide links. They did not offer screeners for it. You had to watch it there. And my choices were 11 o'clock in the morning when I am in the middle of working, or 6 o'clock in the evening when I was already committed to screen another movie. And so I was just like, well, I guess I'll just watch Shang-Chi when it comes out. I'll just watch it with everyone else. And that's a bummer, but oh, well, that's the choice I had to make because they didn't offer links for it. Yeah. And the thing is, like, I love Marvel movies. I love all the Marvel movies, even the bad ones. And I will still go pay money to see this movie just because I want to see it in the theater if I can. But to just not even give me that option now was just, I don't understand it. Especially while things are getting worse and not better.
Yeah, exactly. There's this pushing towards like, oh, we're going to go back to normalcy. It's just like, well, you know what? Normalcy wasn't working great before all of this happened. Yeah. Now I think that maybe we need to talk about not just going back to that. And yeah, a lot of it is about the bottom line. But ultimately, when you come back to someone like Villeneuve, what do you want? Like, because there's exactly one way that I am going to see Dune. I am going to see it on a small screen. I'm not going to sit in a movie theater for that movie. One, I don't particularly want to pay for anything that I don't want to pay extra for anything that Denis Villeneuve makes. And two, I'm not comfortable sitting in a theater. I don't think I'm going to be comfortable in October either. Yeah. That's it, right? So and this is the other thing, his getting the second part of that film made is going to be dependent on people watching it. So yeah, you would
which is why I don't understand. Yeah. And I mean, he didn't win. Like, they're gonna do the HBO Max release drop, which is good, but yeah, it's like if he were really getting his way, that wouldn't be happening and his movie would fail, and then he'd be mad that it failed. And I don't get it.
You would, I don't know. I just think that if you're a filmmaker with any degree of understanding of the world, and maybe, he's not, and certainly people like Christopher Nolan aren't, as he proved last year, you would.
I mean, Villeneuve is Canadian, so.
So mean. The goal would be for the most people to get to see your movie. That, like, I don't understand why you wouldn't want that. However they watch it. And to dictate, or to try to dictate, say like, well, I'm angry because, you're not seeing it correctly. It's like, I have a problem with that. Mm-hmm. So, congrats to Denis Villeneuve. I did not particularly want to see your version of Dune, but now I really don't. So thanks, bro.
But a movie I do want to see, and I will watch this on any screen I can when it finally comes to theaters near us, is the Black Canary movie.
Yay!
This
so
is
glad.
happening. Oh my gosh. When I saw Jurnee Smollett, she retweeted, I think it was either Deadline or I can't remember who it was last night, probably Collider. When she retweeted that last night and I saw that it's really a go, I was so excited because, oh my gosh, I want that movie right now.
Yeah, and it's going to be with Misha Green too.
Yeah, Misha Green is directing it.
Yeah, who did Lovecraft Country. Wow, There we go. And that show had issues and everything, but I'm really excited about the possibilities of that.
It definitely had issues, but it was this big, spectacular, like just big show. And I almost called it a movie, but it's the kind of thing where I'm like, I'm excited to see her translate that into Black Canary's story and see where we go with this. I can't wait. And honestly, I think this is the route. Like, I think we're gonna see another Birds of Prey movie too. I really do. Because of this.
I really hope so. I really hope so. Yeah, but yes, it'll be awesome. Like, I'm very excited about it. Definitely.
Yep. So I don't know when it's coming. We just they just announced that it's happening, but yeah, can't wait. Cannot wait. So that will be fun. All right. Okay. So we wanted to talk about not Denis Villeneuve this week. So let's actually get into the whole reason that we're here today, which is talk about animation, but not just like Disney movies and Mickey Mouse and stuff like that. We wanted to talk more specifically about animation that is geared toward grown-ups, and with more adult themes, not like porn necessarily, but grown-up movies.
Yeah, whenever you say like, oh, adult animation, I was like, okay, what we mean by this is animation for adults, not like your Jessica Rabbit porn, whatever.
Yeah, you get some interesting searches when you Google adult animation. So I recommend searching animation for grown-ups. That's much safer results. So anyway, before we get into some specifics on some of our favorites and different mediums and stuff like that, let's talk a little bit about animation in general and a little bit of the history of it. So Lauren, why don't you start us off with kind of where animation came from?
Well, animation, I mean, the concept of moving images has been around since forever. I mean, actually, if you look at the Wikipedia page about the history of animation, you have things talking about like Leonardo da Vinci and cave paintings, and so the idea of like drawings that represent motion, right, has been around for a really long time. But then, of course, with cinema, you begin to get some of the earliest examples of cinema have actually been animation. So one of the earliest examples is, of course, the Magic Lantern, and so it's essentially just this projection of fast images that gives the appearance of movement. And so then you get into some of the later actually filmed animation. And we've talked about people like Lottie Reniger, who was a major animator, directed one of the first, if not the first, full-length animated feature film.
So I'm going to just pause you for a second because I'm looking at an article that was published on, let's see, New York Film Academy's website. And they credit the first animated feature film as a 1917 film from, I'm not sure which country, but it's South American, called El Apostal.
Does it still exist?
I'm not sure.
Because I think that's the issue, that the Adventures of Prince Ahmed is the
oldest
surviving.
one that exists.
It's
Yeah.
the
Oh yeah,
surviving.
it was destroyed in a house fire. That's so sad.
Yeah, and I think that there might also be even an earlier one. I want to say that there's one from Hungary or someplace like that they think was even earlier than that. But again, they don't exist anymore. So again,
it's so sad.
Like most silent films, like most examples of early cinema, there's a lot that it isn't around, right? So we don't know necessarily. But Adventures of Prince Ahmed does tend to, it predates Disney, it predates most other films.
Yeah, Prince Ahmed was what, 1927?
26, yeah.
26.
And then, of course, into the 20s, you're beginning to get, you have a lot of animated shorts all the way actually through early cinematic period. So you've got Thomas Edison films. I think that one of the earliest is a film about a dinosaur, if I can remember exactly when that pops up.
Gertie the Dinosaur in 1914.
Gertie the Dinosaur, yeah. And that's also a surviving film. So some of this is also about what is surviving. We know about particular types of films that appeared much earlier than that. But like, again, even if you just look back through the chronology of animation, you have various forms of animated images going all the way back to the mid-19th century. And this is, of course, long before cinema is even invented.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, by about the 1920s, you're getting into the Disney period, Warner Brothers, Max Fleischer Studios, stuff like that. But I think that in terms of the discussion that we're having today, one of the things we need to note is that none of these films were intended for children, in the sense that they were the concept of animated figures were for small children, that this wasn't an adult pursuit. This was an adult pursuit. Most of these films, and this is even going into, the more advanced kind of animation that was being produced by Disney or Lottie Reniger, and then later into Looney Tunes, stuff like that, were directed at everybody, pretty much. These were films that were being made for not necessarily family friendly, but they were not being made for specific age groups. This was not like, oh, kids will like this, but adults, are too advanced for it or something like that. These are films that are being made for everybody.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about just animation as far as our own personal connection to it. So what are some of the things that you like in general? Not film specifically, unless you want to go there now, but in general, what are some of the things that you enjoy about animated filmmaking?
I think that it's the scope of animated filmmaking is remarkable, because we're limited at what we can do with live action. We've become less limited, obviously, and so now there's much more overlap between what is animated and what isn't. But the sheer scope of what you can represent in animation is just so much bigger. And I think that later we're going to talk about films like Paprika. The ability to just kind of do whatever you want to do almost with those kinds of stories is something that I really like. It's the fact that you can have, something as simple as Wile E. Coyote dying multiple times and coming back, falling off of cliffs, which you can't do with real coyotes. I mean, you can, but it's illegal and you shouldn't do it. But certainly they're not going to survive falling. but that's the thing. You can represent this extremity of everything. You can show so much. You can pretty much do whatever you want to, whatever a filmmaker wants to imagine, or whatever you want to imagine is something that can actually be produced by animation. And that's one of the reasons I like some of these art house animation showcases and things like that, of actually showing this is what animation is capable of. And it stretches way beyond, cute stories about talking animals.
Yeah, there was a film festival that started here in LA a couple years ago called Animation is Film. And I went to it the first year, and then there's been scheduling conflicts and stuff. And then I hope it comes back, because they did such a great job of inviting filmmakers from all over the world with different types. You've got claymation, you've got hand drawing, you've got computer animation, you've got painted, you got pencil sketches, you got all sorts of different types of artistry on display with so many different themes. And it's themes that adults can relate to. It's humor that is geared for more sophisticated minds. And yeah, what I think, especially with thinking back to the films I saw the first year, I was watching really interesting, there's one called Bird Boy, and it's a Spanish film, and it has such an interesting way of showing the effects, personal and sociological, about like drug addiction and how that can just destroy people, and how it can destroy like a whole way of life. And then there's other films too where it's like just the creativity that is possible in animated films. Like you mentioned, the lines are getting blurred now because anything is possible in live action films too, quote unquote live action, because the reason that those things are possible is because of all the stuff that has been done in animation. And so it's like one of these days they're going to accept or finally be forced to admit that like the Marvel movies are half animated.
It's true. It's true. Well, it's like, the release of stuff like The Lion King. It's like live action. It's like, not really. I mean...
not at all. There's one shot in that whole movie that's an actual, like, from a camera shot of a real thing that exists that wasn't created by artists. And so...
Well, and to kind of relate to that, that's, you're talking about the different kinds of animation that exist. And there's such again, it's that broad scope. There's so many different forms of animation, there's so many different mediums that you can use, the hand-drawn, computer animated, claymation, stop motion, all of these different things. One of the weirder ones is something called pin screen animation, which is literally just like these little pins. And it had a very short lifespan. I think it was created in like 1932. But again, it's fascinating, and it shows both what cinema can do, what the use of cinema can do, and also the degree of just human creativity. Mm-hmm. There's so many different ways of animating things, right? And I like the title of that festival because it's also true. I mean, cinema is animation. Cinema started out as these single static images that then you run, and when you run them, they become active. They become motion pictures.
Yeah, exactly. And when you use these different mediums for your storytelling, it opens up the world of what you can tell too. And there's such a broad scope of like I mentioned, themes. I've seen animated films that deal with illegal immigration, with war, with trafficking, with all kinds of things that are just, it just shows that animation is something that we can all appreciate. And I think that it's interesting to watch how people just dismiss it as just for kids. We're going to talk more specifically about animated TV shows in a bit, but I remember when I was in like junior high and The Simpsons Yes, this is how old I am. The Simpsons first, got started as a TV show. I remember too, and it was just a short on the Tracy Ullman show, but I was in junior high when it became a full-fledged TV show on its own. And so many parents were letting their little kids watch it and had no idea what it was because they didn't watch it themselves. They just thought, oh, it's a cartoon, it's for children, and didn't realize all the adult themes that were in that show.
The Simpsons is very much a primetime sitcom, basically, situation. So not like really extreme adult themes, but definitely not. I mean, some of the earliest Simpson episodes are about like alcoholism and
parents at the time, I remember when it was first getting started, parents couldn't understand why their kids were suddenly being so disrespectful to them. It's like, because you let their hero be Bart Simpson.
Well, and what I find very funny is that then, fast forward to me in junior high when South Park came out. And it was a similar thing. It was just like, this is it looks like it's for children. And I remember, South Park has its own issues. There are things that I love about South Park and things that I look back on, like, maybe not so great. But I remember, I think it was Trey Parker and Matt Stone came out and were like, look, our show is on at 10 o'clock on Comedy Central. Mm-hmm. Like, if your kid is up watching television at 10 o'clock and they're watching Comedy Central, then the issue is not our stupid cartoon.
Right, exactly.
And it's true. It's like, just because it's animated does not mean, I think we finally accepted this, just because it's animated does not mean that it is for children and that it is appropriate for children.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I think that, honestly, I think one of the ways that we've really finally started to accept that, and this is, I would venture to say that this is more of an American problem than anywhere else, because I think that around the world, they seem to, just looking at some of the more grown-up animated films like that get nominated for Oscars, for example, they're foreign language films. Usually they deal with themes that are for a more international audience. And so I feel like, and maybe this is conjecture, but I feel like this is a uniquely American problem where we just go, oh, cartoon kids.
And I think that, some of the objections to things like The Simpsons or South Park were also a matter of policing. It was the morality police kind of attitude. And I'm not saying at all that South Park is appropriate for 8-year-old children. It is not. But I think that there's this attitude that because I don't like it, it should not exist.
Right. And because I object to it, it shouldn't exist, instead of just parents parenting their children. Yeah,
exactly. It's that issue of using, particularly when in the time periods that we're talking about, using the television as a babysitter, essentially. Yeah. So, watch anything that you want to, kids. It's like, maybe not. And I do think that we've reached a point where we understand that. And particularly when in regards to animation, the concept of adult animation on television in particular has become much more ubiquitous because we have things like The Simpsons very much pioneered that. This whole concept of television shows that are sitcoms that are, some of them are very mature. Like I say, I don't think that South Park is ever really intended for children. Teenagers, young adults, yeah. Mm-hmm. But, now we have shows like Bob's Burgers. We have shows like, one of my favorites was King of the Hill. I'm still very sad that it's not.
I love King of the Hill
anymore. No, Hank Hill would never have voted for Trump. Thank you very much.
No.
Just don't even start with me. Hank Hill. Hank is a good man. Like in most ways, he doesn't always get it, but he is actually a good human being.
Yeah.
But yes, you have all of these, and we actually have a question about Rick and Morty, right? So all of these shows that are very much for adults, or at least for older children and teenagers.
Yeah, exactly. And since we did go ahead and start talking about this now, let's ask our question. So this is from Serena6783. What are your thoughts on Rick and Morty?
I don't have any, because I have not seen it.
Me neither.
At all.
I was hoping that you had.
I'm really sorry. But let me talk about why I haven't seen it, because I think that this is, an interesting point, actually. No, not because it's a kid's show. No, because of all of the toxicity that has surrounded it. You hear about, and the way that I was introduced to Rick and Morty, the first time that I heard about it was all of these conversations about like Rick and Morty fanboys, and some of the attitudes that were taken about Rick and Morty by some of these straight white men, this kind of reinforcement of incel culture, like all of this stuff. And the thing is, I've seen a lot of dialogue talking about, well, that's not the show's fault, and it's probably not, but it's one of the reasons why I haven't really sat down to watch it. And I'm saying this as someone who I love animated sitcoms. I love Bob's Burgers. I love King of the Hill. I love The Great North, those shows. And I would probably enjoy Rick and Morty if I actually sat down and watched it. But the toxic nature of it has just completely put me off.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't have a reason. I just haven't watched it. I really just haven't. But it's funny. It's like, I don't have a problem with animated TV shows. I just don't tend to watch them. Not for even any particular reason. Like, I did love King of the Hill. I've seen Bob's Burgers and it's really good. I've seen a couple of episodes of Archer at the insistence of one of my coworkers, and so it's I think that, just like films, I think animated television shows are very creative and sometimes wickedly funny, but I just tend to be more drawn toward live action when it comes to TV.
Well,
so
this is an interesting point, though, because a closely related show, actually, to Rick and Morty and to something that I have seen is BoJack Horseman,
which I also have not watched.
Which is a complicated show, but BoJack Horseman, and then also Tuca and Birdie, which I'm very sorry to say that I have not seen the new season because it's not on a network that I can access. But I think that it's going to be on HBO Max at some point, so I am looking forward to that. But something like BoJack Horseman, which is deeply adult, but one of the things that these shows can actually address, and I think that they can do it because they're animated, is some of these questions of toxicity, the questions of in the case of BoJack Horseman, the questions of addiction, and they can represent it in ways that are maybe almost more palatable than if this was taking place with real human beings. And the fact that the medium of animation kind of allows for a greater degree of exaggeration, a greater degree of extremity, means that we can actually talk about some of these topics and make it funny, but also really address them in a serious way. And I think that that's something that particularly BoJack Horseman and then Tuca and Birdie have managed to do, is to make this kinetic, insane, hilarious shows that then have these very deep and emotionally affecting plot lines.
Cool. Well, on that note, let's talk about that as far as some more specific animated films that we have enjoyed. So what are a couple of your favorite animated films?
I love Fantasia because it fucked me up.
I love Fantasia too, and that's probably the first like grown-up animated movie I ever saw.
Yeah, speaking of an animated film that looks like it's for children and is very much not, because you have oh, it's Disney, it's fine, Mickey Mouse is in it, it'll be great. It's like, no, my brain will never be the same after seeing Night on Bald Mountain, ever.
Yeah.
But I do love Fantasia. I actually particularly love the sequence Night on Bald Mountain because it's so frightening and so bizarre. But again, it's that this wonderful marriage of image and sound, right? There's no dialogue really, other than the little interim conversations between each piece. There's no dialogue. It's just image, and it's image done to these fantastic pieces of music, and I like I like that quality in it, definitely. So that's definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah. A couple of mine that are sort of related are Persepolis from, I want to say 2010, and The Breadwinner from 2017. And I say they're kind of related because one is a girl who grew up in Iran, and the other is a girl from Afghanistan. And they're very, very different films, and they're very different stories, but they're the reason that I feel like they're kind of connected, at least in my brain, is because of the fact that they're these stories of young girls growing up in really oppressive places in the world, and the different things that they have to do to be able to survive that. And of course their journeys are very, very different, but thematically I feel like they share some similarities. But Persepolis is this beautiful, it's hand drawn, and it's like there's some present day scenes that are in color, but then most of the film is flashbacks, and it's all black and white. And the use of black and white in animation, and especially in this style of animation, is so it's just beautiful, and it's mesmerizing, and it really is effective in conveying mood, because of the way that they shadow and everything, certain aspects. It's really incredible. And then with The Breadwinner, it's very bright and colorful, even while all these really dark things are going on. And actually, in the wake of everything that's happening in Afghanistan now, it's a good time to go back and revisit that film. But it's one of those where it's like the use of color almost betrays the theme, but in a really effective way. So it's like really sad, tragic things are happening all around her, but it's bright. And so it's kind of like when you have a horror movie set in the day, and there's like this really interesting dream sequence in The Breadwinner that is a different style of animation completely, that just makes it stand out. And it uses like kind of some of Lotte Reniger's style with the paper animation and some shadows and things. It's fascinating. So if you haven't seen The Breadwinner or Persepolis, please go check both of those out. I think The Breadwinner is on Netflix. Persepolis is currently on Criterion.
Yeah, I've seen Persepolis. I still haven't seen The Breadwinner, partially because you said it's really tough.
Yeah, it is, but it's so beautiful.
Yeah, I would like to see it. I just have to be in the right mindset.
Both of those have female directors, by the way.
Oh, cool. I didn't realize The Breadwinner did.
Yeah, Nora Twomey. She's Irish.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Speaking of Irish films, I just want to mention Song of the Sea, which, we can argue about whether or not it's a kid's movie or not. It's a beautiful film. By the end of that film, I was sobbing. And so that's a film that's directed by Tom Moore, who also did Tom Moore and a whole team of people.
Yeah.
Who
did Wolfwalkers.
They also did Wolfwalkers, and they also did The Book of Kells. Which is also a beautiful film, and I just love. And
they're the same studio that did The Breadwinner, by the way.
Oh,
Nora Twomey has worked with all those guys. Yeah.
So I like that style of animation generally. Song of the Sea, I saw it during the pandemic. Admittedly, it's like kind of the height of the pandemic. It just really affected me. It's a beautiful film. It's very touching. It's very uplifting in a lot of ways. It's very funny, but I just love that kind of it's that animation that feels like it's a picture book come to life, and it's gorgeous. So I just love that film. I love pretty much everything that's done by Studio Ghibli, which again it's the question of, is this a kids movie, is it not? I don't think that Spirited Away is particularly a children's film, but that's one of my favorites. And in relation to that, I recently got to see Paprika, which was directed by Satoshi Kon. I think it was his last film, if not his last film, but close to his last. This was back from 2006, and it's basically, as I said this on Twitter, it's basically Inception but good. But it's this idea about moving, having a device that can put you into another person's dream. And what happens over the course of the film is that the people who are using this device actually are able to project other dreams into people's dreams into other people's heads. And it becomes this wonderful, fascinating kind of layered effect of moving in it. What are dreams? What's reality? What is like actually something that someone is experiencing in the quote real world, which of course is all animated, versus what is happening in a dream world, and kind of unpacking all of that. And it comes off as this techno thriller, as psychological thriller, but again, beautiful animation, really well done, and I think a really again, it's that ability of animation to be able to depict things that live action can't completely approximate. And so that element of the dream world, of dream logic and all of that is really fascinating when it's done in an animated format where literally you can defy the laws of gravity, you can defy the laws of physics.
Along those lines, I didn't get around to watching that this week, but I really wanted to. And I know it's on Criterion, so I'm going to watch it maybe today. But one that I did get to catch was A Town Called Panic.
I still haven't seen that. I want to.
Oh my gosh.
That's on my list.
It is hilarious. And it also does what you're talking about, where it's like things that couldn't happen in real life that just keep happening. So it's a stop motion animated, and it's almost like someone watched Toy Story and went, what can we do that's similar but not? And so it's basically all the characters in it are toys, like from a farm set or something. So you've got like a cowboy, and you've got an Indian, and you've got a horse. They all talk, but they all have those like plates that those like action figure toys stand on, so they don't actually move their legs, you know what I mean? Like the toy soldiers and stuff. Yeah. And so they don't really walk. They just kind of like kind of hop around. And so it's Horse's birthday, but Cowboy and Indian both forgot. And so they're like panicking, like, oh no, we need to do something for his birthday. So they get him to leave the house, and they decide they're going to build a outside brick barbecue. And so Indian goes to order the bricks that they need. And then there's like a mishap happens, and Cowboy ends up accidentally ordering 50 million bricks instead of 50 bricks. And so then they panic and they don't know what to do, because still they're trying to keep Horse from realizing that they forgot his birthday. So they pile them up on top of the house. And of course that doesn't work out. And so it's just like, it's so funny. And it's one of these where every time something starts to like, okay, now we've got it situated, then something else, some other catastrophe happens, and it's just like one disaster after another, and it's constantly like, how are we going to get ourselves out of this? And then they get on to the next thing, and it is so inventive and so funny. And yeah, I enjoyed that one. I highly recommend it.
I will. That's been on my list for a really long time, and
Awesome.
it's been available on like different platforms, and so I think I'll finally watch it.
Yeah, well, it's on Criterion at least until the end of the month. So
there are a lot of really wonderful films on Criterion right now.
There are. They have Waltz with Bashir, which is so beautiful. They have like another one of those really heartbreaking ones. They've got Chico and Rita. Fantastic Planet, Fabulous Bear and Munchausen, is that it?
Yeah, the what is that filmmaker? Karel Zeman. And he's a Czech filmmaker. He also did he did called The Invention of Destruction. There are a whole bunch of them, and that in terms of the question of live action versus animations, what he does are these massive animated sets, right? Like hand drawn. They're truly remarkable, and then integrates like real live action figures. So you have actors who are like traversing this animated world, basically. It's really spectacular. Like I don't even know how to describe what he does. Invention of Destruction is, I think, his best. I found The Adventures of Baron Munchausen a little slow moving, but it's a really fascinating form generally, and I can't think of anyone else who does anything like that. Maybe Terry Gilliam would come the closest.
Well, it's funny because actually, so the Fabulous Baron Munchausen was 1962 animated film. It's yeah, so that I guess got a lot of play around the world. And so I just was reading something that said that Terry Gilliam saw it at BFI and it inspired him to make The Adventures of Baron Munchausen in the 80s. So
See, yeah,
you
you can definitely see the affinity between the kind of designs that Terry Gilliam does and the work that Zeman does. But Zeman, like I say, I find it difficult to even express exactly what he's doing. I guess that the other person would be Georges Méliès. That kind of, combination of hand-drawn images and sets with these live action figures.
Cool. I have not actually seen either one, so. Anyway, any others that you wanted to mention?
I'm trying to think of any others. I think that again, you're talking about animation. Animation is so expansive. Oh, I did want to say again, kind of being like, oh, this is about adult animation. Just like, well, I am a very grown-up adult and I love Wallace and Gromit.
Oh yeah, Wallace and Gromit are the best.
And Wallace and Gromit are wonderful. The penguin in The Wrong Trousers is the most horrifying villain you're gonna see in an animated film, and I love it because it's just like, how do they manage to make this little dude look so evil? And he's like a penguin with no expression on his face. But he's evil. You're just like, that's a bad penguin. Oh. It's a bad penguin. Yeah, I love Wallace and Gromit. I love Curse of the Were-Rabbit. I admit that. Like,
I do too.
Like the problem with Wallace and Gromit is that I'm always like, I always want to quote Wallace and Gromit somehow, but I'm like, but you can't, can you? Because a lot of it is just like, and then he looks really cute when he's like a bunny.
Oh, love it. I'm trying to remember which was the first one I saw. I think it was A Close Shave, which was a short. Yeah, I really liked that one a lot. I'm also a fan of Chicken Run too. That one's fun. Same people behind that one.
Aardman.
Yeah, and we got another question. This is from @Noah_Saturn. Who is your favorite animator?
That's really hard to answer. I think that definitely Miyazaki is in the mix for me. His films are just so gorgeous, and honestly, I'm not a big fan of that style of animation. Anyways, I'm not a big fan of anime generally, but I really love just the tactile nature of his film. The sense that you can actually feel the blades of grass in an animated film is just so strange and yet wonderful.
Yeah. It's a hard question for me to answer just because of how, once again, how collaborative it is. And so for me to just say, well, I really like this person, I feel like that discounts all the many, many people that go into helping craft the projects that they work on, which is, I hope that doesn't sound like I'm dismissing the question, because I'm not. I think it's a great question. It's just it's a tough one for me to answer. And so if I'm looking at individual artists, I think I do have to go back to like Lotte Reiniger, because even though she also worked collaboratively with other people, I think that she tended to do a lot of that creative design herself and working very directly, in the medium, not just directing. And so that question, like if you're talking who's our favorite animated directors, that might be a little bit easier for me, because then I would definitely say like Tom Moore is way up there, as far as someone I really just I admire the projects that he does, both as a director and as a producer. And then I have to look at, there are a couple of Pixar and Disney folks that I also really like. too. I think Pete Docter is really, really talented in that area. But I also like Lord and Miller, but I think that they're more creative as like writers. Yeah, I think they do great work as directors, but I think what I really like about their stuff is the writing more than anything. So I don't know, that I feel like that's not a great answer to the question, but just because it's a hard question for me to specifically answer.
Well, I agree. And I think that a lot of the time, when we say, so I say Miyazaki, I think that what it actually comes down to is Studio Ghibli.
Yeah.
So you're almost talking about animation studios more so, because there are the styles of different kinds of animation, the types of films that various studios produce. I mean, we've reached a point where Pixar, we know what a Pixar film looks like, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Same thing with Tom Moore's work, that, that style of animation, even if Moore wasn't involved at all, right? That style of animation is so clear and so obvious, and such a beautiful style of animation, that you're almost talking more about, or Disney is another one, Looney Tunes or others. Yeah. You have a lot of different artists working on them, but the style is very clear and noticeable, and you either like it or you don't like it,
Yeah, exactly. Well, any final thoughts on animation?
No, I mean, I think that it's one of those that I admit I give it shorter shrift a lot of the time, and watching some of those films that are on the Criterion channel right now has kind of reminded me that, hey, animation has a lot of different ways of approaching film, right? And there are a lot of different stories that can be told, and it isn't just Disney and Pixar. It isn't just WB. It's there's a expansive world,
and so much of it, just to kind of expand on something I mentioned earlier, so much of it is international. Like, you get some amazing films, but you have to be willing to watch stuff that involves subtitles, and there's so many just really genius stories being told around the world in animation, and it's fun to look at, even like let's say it's hand drawn, even from one country to another, what that looks like is wildly different and so fun to explore.
Absolutely.
So really quickly before we completely wrap things up, we have both now seen A24's The Green Knight, starring Dev Patel. Finally, it's a movie that exists and it is now in our brains forever. And I talked a little bit about my feelings on it, but now, Lauren, how did you feel about The Green Knight?
So I
do not actually know the answer to this question.
I neither do I. I actually spent the morning writing up a review in which I was like, how do I feel about this movie? I liked it. Question mark. I didn't like it. Question mark. I think that it has a lot to recommend it. I think that's a very beautiful film. I like, you mentioned the slowness of it, but the fact that there's never a point in the film where I was like, okay, now get on with it, please. Like, I think that the slowness actually really helped to draw me into that world. And I liked how odd it is. Like, and I mean that in a very positive way. Like, it's a strange film, and that's because it's based on a strange poem and it tells a strange story. But I like a lot of the things that David Lowery, right, is trying to do. I loved Dev Patel. I thought that he gave a great performance. I actually loved everybody in it. I love a lot of the ideas. I like some of the sequences and everything. I'm not convinced that it does what it needs to do. And this is one of the things that I think I will be able to pick through a little bit better in my review. So, might wait for that. But I felt like the film itself didn't try to engage enough with the culture that it was depicting. And that includes the religious, the social, the cultural underpinnings of the story of the Green Knight to begin with. And some of this might be because I studied the poem back in college. I was never a medievalist, but it was something that I was really interested in. And I think that the film, some of the changes that the film chooses to make to the poem, I understand, but I also think that it's missing something. It's missing that engagement with the society that it is actually depicting, and with the deep complexity of chivalry and of romance and of Christianity and the use of the supernatural, the use of the pagan. And while the film, I think, kind of moves in that direction, I don't think it completely engages with it in a meaningful enough way that it actually works in the way that it needs to in order for it to be a really successful film.
Well, and I think, sorry, I'm going to just jump in for a second. I think that that's a really valid perspective, especially considering the fact that this is something I was thinking about too, although for me, I was just more willing to just accept it on its face, but I also haven't had the academic, experience with it that you have. But David Lowery is from like Milwaukee. So he, this is one of those things that we talk about a lot, of like people making films that are outside of their own experience and knowledge and education and tradition. And it's funny because normally we dismiss that when it comes to like, Western European or American stuff, but that is equally applicable.
Yeah, I think so. One of the touch points that I had when I was watching it was like, well, this is, it's an A24 film, right? And I don't want to give too much credit to the studio that produces it, but there was definitely a point of comparison with something like The Witch, right? Where it's this deep engagement with a very specific and in many ways very alien culture to our contemporary moment. Yeah. What I think The Witch succeeds at, and again, people disagree with me, obviously, but what I think The Witch succeeds at is immersing the viewer in a culture that we ultimately don't understand. And trying to make it feel realistic, trying to make it feel like this is the reality of these people. I didn't feel like The Green Knight completely succeeded at doing that. And so in other words, by the end of the film, and I understand why the film ends where it does, I think I understand what the film is trying to get at. But I feel like at the end of the day, it's a little bit superficial. It doesn't, and it's because it doesn't seem to have this deeper engagement with the culture that it is depicting. And that's not necessarily saying that, it can't, or that Lowery or anyone else can't make a film like that, but there does need to be that extra layer of connection, I think.
Yeah, I hear you. And I don't disagree with you. I think for myself, because I think the reason it works more for me is just because like I also lack that deeper connection to the material, so, and to the culture.
but again, I think the film can do it without necessarily, and I'm not at all suggesting that the film stop itself dead and give us a primer on the chivalric code of 14th century England. Right. Like, that's not what I'm up to at all. But although of course it's taking place even earlier than that, but the poem was written in the 14th century, they think. Yeah. So yeah, but I do think that you need that. There's a connection missing. That's really the only way that I can describe it, and maybe I would be able to do it better in like my 1,000-word review that I just spat out earlier. There's just a little bit. There's something that's missing in that connection, and like I say, I think that it makes the film ultimately more superficial. And I don't think that that's intentional, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think that Lowery just doesn't get it or anything like that. It's that it's just not quite there.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So that's my feeling about The Green Knight.
All right.
I enjoyed it. I liked watching it. Like, I wasn't sitting there going like, oh, this is boring or anything like that. I don't think it's boring at all.
Yeah.
And the fact that I'm spending this much time thinking about it, I think speaks well to the film as well.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and that really is one of Lowery's strengths, not just in this film, but in general. Like, he does this is, I think, the biggest example or the strongest example of his patience as a filmmaker is in A Ghost Story, where not really anything happens, but everything happens. And just a lot of he just takes a lot of time. Have you seen A Ghost Story?
I haven't seen A Ghost Story yet.
Oh man, that is such an intriguing film, and it's one that people either love it or hate it. There's really no room for in between. And I'm definitely in the love it camp, but a lot of people around me are like, that movie is so stupid, I hated every minute of it. And it's like, you know what, I totally get it. I understand why you would, and I don't judge you for it.
I have to say, I think that The Green Knight is kind of in the lighthouse section of my psyche. It's like, I appreciate what you're doing. I don't know if it works, but I'm willing to try to figure out if it does. Huh. I'm intrigued. That's kind of.
Well, and speaking of that, it's funny because I also this week I saw The Night House, which is now I guess out in limited release. But I saw it the other night and I had a similar feeling with that movie. As a horror movie, it's really effective. It's got some really just brilliant chills and scares. Like I literally got chills watching it. I've never had that happen in any horror movie ever, but like the first time something happens and I felt like the, the goosebumps on my arms, and I was just like, what? That's weird. Is it cold in here? And I was like, no, that's the movie doing that to me. And it happened a couple more times. It was the weirdest experience. But this movie really was, as a horror movie, to me, it was very effective. As a metaphor for, and I don't want to give anything away, anything at all. Just watch it if you're interested. But as a metaphor for what it's trying to represent, I feel like it doesn't quite work. But I also appreciated the effort. And I thought, this is actually really intriguing. It's very well done in a lot of ways. And it's like, it's almost there, but it needed just a little bit more. And it's only, no, maybe it was longer than I was thinking. It's only an hour and a half. No, I think it's pretty close to 2 hours, but it's like, just with a little bit more, it could have made its point a lot more clearly and just fully been like 100% A+ movie, but it just kind of misses the mark just a bit, but enough that, like you're saying with The Green Knight, enough that I still enjoyed watching it. I'm still glad I saw it. I don't dislike the movie at all. It's just not quite where I wanted it to be.
Not quite there, but that's the thing. I appreciate when films shoot for that.
Yeah,
I appreciate it's just like, you know what, I don't think it completely works, but it's really impressive that you even tried.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That you came so close, right? And I think that I appreciate when films are really ambitious that way and are truly trying to engage with their topic. And like you say, sometimes it doesn't work, and also what might not work for me might work for you or works for other people. But still, it's so easy to appreciate that, to be like, you know what, that was awesome. You did your best. Like, I don't think it paid off completely, but good job.
Yeah, exactly. So 2 great movies that you should watch if you could get a chance to. And form your own opinion and let us know what you think. So, yeah. All right. Well, that's gonna... I think we've talked long enough today, don't you?
I think we have, yeah, probably.
So
talked about many things.
Yeah. Speaking of animation, and we were gonna talk about this week, but we didn't get a chance to. But we had our first Patreon event last week. It was Who Framed Roger Rabbit. We're working out some of the bugs. We're figuring out some ways to make this, a really cool experience. Disney Plus, we learned, is a little bit limited because you can only react with emojis and not with any actual like chatting like you can with Amazon, or I think Netflix does it too. But
Netflix does. Netflix has like a whole chat window that you chat
so does
with
Amazon.
people.
Yeah. And so So we'll work that out. But that was our first time, and we will be releasing our bonus episode about Who Framed Roger Rabbit as soon as we record it, which will be very
shortly.
Yeah. But we would like to thank all of our patrons who make this show possible. And we just want to thank you all for supporting us. That's Adriana, Ali, Heather, James, Kathleen, Carriata, Mason, Matt, Matthew, Michelle, Monty, Nanina, Robert, Steve, Sharon, Tao, and Will. Thank you. If you would like to join their ranks and become a patron also, and then be invited to our exclusive events, you can go to patreon.com/citizendame. We're definitely going to be doing more of these, so this wasn't a one-off. We also have our Zazzle store, but changes are coming, but you can still check out what's there so far. We've got zazzle.com/citizendamepod and our Ko-Fi, which is ko-fi.com/citizendame. But we love to hear from you, not just for your money. So there's lots of ways that you can reach out to us. We love email. citizendamepod@gmail.com is a great way to contact us. And be sure to check out our website, citizendamepod.com. Lauren's going to have a review of The Green Knight, I'm guessing, fairly soon. We've got some other stuff there. I'm going to try to write a review of The Night House as well. And maybe, maybe Reminiscence too. We'll see. And I know we keep promising it, but the fives are coming back. They really are. It's just been chaotic couple of weeks. So we're working on that. But you can also reach out to us on the socials. For Citizen Dame Pod, we are on Twitter and Instagram @Citizen Dame Pod, and Letterboxd, we're @Citizen Dame. Lauren, where can people find you?
I am on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd @LH Business.
And I am on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd @Karen M. Peterson. So that's going to wrap things up for the week. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great week.
Bye.
Uh-oh. Here comes the evening rush. Clear out, fellas! Man, I thought that radiation...
Oh, what a serious drinking. Evening, Mo. Morning, Mo.
Yeah, all right, listen up, guys. The Springfield police have told me that 91% of all traffic accidents are caused by you six guys. Yeah, I know. But the bad news is we gotta start having designated drivers. We'll choose the same way they picked the Pope. Everybody reach in and draw a pickled egg. Whoever gets the black egg stays sober tonight.
You got your black one.